Okay, good evening, dear colleagues. Welcome to this conversation tonight, which will be on First Nation Indigenous people. And it's a pleasure to have with us three colleagues that we will walk us through the experience of their organization in working together with indigenous peoples and First Nation peoples and workers. I'm Paola Simonetti. I am the director of the Equality Department at the ITUC. This is an important theme that, of course, will be a theme of engagement for the overall international trade union movement. So we know that indigenous people represent 6.2% of the world population, amounting to over 476 million individuals spread across the globe. 86.3% of the global indigenous population have informal jobs, with a risk of exposure to violation of fundamental principles and rights at work, and also lack of social protection. So the discussion tonight is actually meant to depict the challenges of First Nation and indigenous workers around the risk of being discriminated and excluded, and also how trade unions, how our organization can take action to ensure their recognition and inclusions in the labor market. So the aim of this conversation with our colleagues and friends tonight is really to share, what we call best practice for the whole movement to build upon. And the conversation will be structured around best practice, for example, on organizing, so what trade unions can do to organize these workers, but also how these workers can be better represented within by the trade unions in their ranks. And then how the rights of indigenous workers can be better recognized in collective bargaining and collective bargaining agreements, and also how the legislation can be, in line with their respect and rights, of course, including the ILO Convention 169. So, in order to kickstart our discussion, we will hear to the panel of these trade union leaders from around the world to share the vision, plans, and actual engagement to make trade unions as a key actors for indigenous workers' inclusion in the labor market, but most widely in the wider society. So we have with us tonight, we were supposed to have with us tonight Florence, president of ZCTU in Zimbabwe, but so apologies on her behalf, because unfortunately she doesn't feel so well, so she couldn't join us, but I thought it was, of course, important to acknowledge that she was supposed to be with us. We have with us David Acuna, president of CUT Chile, and we have Cecil Merete Skoukaun. I'm sorry, I hope I didn't really, mispronounce too much your name, vice president of ELO Norway, ELO's Park, responsible for the Maori policy from NZCTU, New Zealand. So, without further ado, I would like to start the panel discussion with our guests. We have a little bit of more time, as unfortunately the colleague from Zimbabwe could not come. And of course, we will open the floor for the contribution from you, because this is meant really to be an exchange and a lively conversation around this important topic. So I will start with David. So I will switch to Spanish. So,
do you have more of this?
Oh yeah, you need. Could we have the? Thank you, Julia. Just one, yes. Here, no? Yeah. Entonces, David, la CUT viene apoyando a los pueblos mapuche en la defensa de sus territorios originarios. Además, desde que empezó el proceso de discusión de una nueva constitución para Chile, que reemplazará la constitución impuesta por la dictadura, la CUT ha trabajado para que el nuevo texto constitucional reconozca a los pueblos originarios de Chile. ¿Cuáles han sido los resultados de este trabajo de la CUT en los pueblos mapuche y cuáles son los principales pedidos que se quieren reflejan en la nueva Constitución? Gracias, David.
Sí. Bueno, primero saludar, que lo he escuchado mucho, que entregar un valor, saludar a los pueblos originarios de esta tierra, los dueños de la tierra, que lo han saludado también. El acto inaugural del Congreso fue muy también emotivo y tiene un valor muy particular. Yo quiero plantear que mi nombre es David Acuña Millahuayque por mi madre, lo cual me liga también a mis raíces mapuches. Soy parte de una comunidad también indígena en la localidad de donde viene mi madre, que es Nolyehues, cerca de Osorno, en la 10ª región de Chile. Así que quiero partir también por ahí, por hacer un reconocimiento también a mi amada madre. Bueno, nosotros en Chile hemos venido de distintos procesos. Nosotros en el 2019 tuvimos un proceso de estallido social. ¿Y por qué quiero llegar tan atrás? Porque efectivamente el 2019, cuando se generan el proceso del estallido social en Chile, cuando la gente lucha por las reivindicaciones tanto salariales como de pensiones, educación, salud, surge un tema muy identitario, mucha bandera de los pueblos originarios, mucha bandera mapuche, lo cual hizo un principio de lineamiento también con un reconocimiento hacia la nación pueblo mapuche. Este proceso nos llevó también con una salida de un proceso constituyente, el cual nos permitió generar esta discusión que planteaba Paula. Pero lamentablemente en Chile ha habido una alta militarización del territorio mapuche por gobiernos tanto de líneas progresistas, pero sobre todo por gobiernos de derecha, como el último gobierno del presidente Piñera, donde hay una foto que es muy fea y muy fuerte. Piñera visita Temuco y saca su foto es con policía militar detrás, rodeado de policía militar. Entonces, efectivamente, eso es la señal de el combate hacia las reivindicaciones del pueblo. Hoy Chile tiene un nuevo presidente, que es el presidente Gabriel Boric, el cual genera también un cambio. El presidente Boric fue hace un par de días a el territorio Nación Mapuche, en Temuco específicamente, y la foto es distinta. La foto es con dirigentes y dirigentes, con el pueblo en sus espaldas. Entonces, efectivamente, hay un cambio. Bueno, nosotros como país tenemos una deuda histórica con los pueblos indígenas y en particular con el pueblo mapuche, que esperamos superar con la nueva Constitución, y como Central Unitaria de Trabajadores CUT vamos a estar presentes. Desde el retorno de la democracia como Central hemos apoyado las demandas y reivindicaciones territoriales del pueblo mapuche. Aspiramos que con la nueva Constitución, que por primera vez en nuestra historia republicana se considera en Chile un Estado plurinacional, reconociendo la preexistencia de los pueblos indígenas. Como sabrán, la propuesta, como les contaba, fue rechazada en el plebiscito del 4 de septiembre que tuvimos en Chile en este año, pero eso no quiere decir que seguiremos bajo la misma constitución que nos castró como pueblo, y lo digo así porque yo también soy parte del pueblo mapuche, el que fue invisibilizado por la constitución de la dictadura, que hoy queremos superar, recuperando así las demandas territoriales y políticas de mis hermanos y hermanas mapuches. Como país, iniciamos un nuevo proceso de construir una constitución representativa, democrática y con justicia social, donde los derechos de todas y todos los trabajadores sean universales, donde esta nueva Constitución esté en sintonía con el Estado de Derecho y con los instrumentos internacionales que se han suscrito, como el Convenio 169 de la OIT, aprobado por nuestro Congreso Nacional y que desde el 2019 forma parte de la legislación chilena, mismo periodo en el cual Chile votó a favor de la adopción de la Declaración de Naciones Unidas sobre los derechos de los pueblos indígenas. A pesar de los avances que he nombrado, como país estamos muy por debajo de los estándares internacionales en la materia. Y con dolor repito, tenemos una gran deuda con los pueblos indígenas y en particular con el pueblo mapuche. Hemos perpetuado desde una derecha conservadora, patriarcal y patronal una estructura colonial que impide ver a los pueblos indígenas como sujetos de derechos, recibiendo importantes abusos en materia laboral, atentando contra el derecho al trabajo que tiene cualquier trabajador chileno, quedando en la informalidad. Tenemos un importante número de trabajadores, hermanos mapuches, que viven desde la precarización, de la informalidad del trabajo, quedando en desprotección del sistema de protección social. La Central Unitaria de Trabajadores es la más representativa de Chile, con más de 750.000 afiliados, con presencia territorial, donde un 30% pertenece a algún pueblo indígena, y desde nuestro Departamento de Pueblos Originarios velamos por el resguardo de sus derechos fundamentales y laborales, poniendo especial énfasis en las prácticas discriminatorias que existen, propias del modelo que queremos desterrar de nuestro país. Un trabajador mapuche recibe hasta un 20% menos de salario que una persona no mapuche por la misma labor, situación que se acrecienta cuando son mujeres. Un 35,8% de las personas ocupadas se declara pertenecer a un pueblo indígena, siendo el 99% de este grupo personas mapuches, insertándose en sectores como el comercio y la construcción mayoritariamente. Es necesario para Chile ir más allá de la ratificación del Convenio 169 y la Declaración de Naciones Unidas sobre los derechos de pueblos indígenas y la promulgación de la Ley 19.253. Nuestros hermanos y hermanas deben ser personas sujetas a derechos. Como CUT queremos que nuestro país se construya considerando todas las dimensiones que queremos como sociedad, desde la solidaridad, respeto de las diferencias y reconocimiento de los derechos políticos. Este camino como central apoyamos el reconocimiento de los derechos colectivos, sociales y políticos y lingüísticos de los hermanos y hermanas mapuche, representando su autonomía cultural y política como pueblo. Y esa es la lucha que damos diariamente para proteger a mis hermanos y hermanas mapuches, porque solo así podemos construir un país para todos y todas, igualitarios, cuya prioridad sean las personas. Esa es la situación, un pequeño informe que elaboré en torno a la situación que tenemos en Chile, compañera. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Muchísimas gracias, David. De hecho, será un logro muy importante conseguir este Estado plurinacional, como tú dices, consagrado en la nueva Constitución. Entonces, vamos a ver, estáis haciendo un trabajo estupendo en este sentido. Lo que dices, los 20% menos de salarios son datos terribles que todavía tenemos que... sí. Entonces, gracias por compartir cómo es la situación en tu país, cuáles son los retos y los avances. So I will now turn to Sissel. So Sissel is the Vice President of LO Norway, and for her I will have this question. So in consultation with the Sami organizations, LO has worked towards stronger protection against discrimination in statutes and collective agreements, and strengthening the duty of action and reporting in legislation on discrimination. What changes did you manage to get in collective agreements and in legislation? The first question, and what was their added value in the day-to-day life of Sami workers? So please, Sissel, feel free to provide your contribution.
Do you want me to tell the short history at first?
Yes, yeah. Please.
Borrebaby, it means good day. The Norwegian state is founded on the territory of two peoples, the Norwegians and the Sami. The Sami are the indigenous people living in Sápmi, which mainly stretch across the northern parts of 4 countries: Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the Kola Peninsula of Russia. They are minority in most of these areas, which the main except of inland part of Finnmark in northern Norway. Although the Sami are seen as one people, their culture varies between the different regions. It is difficult to calculate the exact population of the Sami people, but estimates are around 80,000, of whom half live in Norway. Only half of these people speak a Sami language, and even fewer can apply it as a written language. Unfortunately, I am a representative of the Sami people who don't speak the language. My grandparents was registered as a Sami-speaking minority with a mixed ethnicity in 1910. But the deep knowledge of the culture and language got lost with my father's generation. He was born a refugee as a result of the Second World War. And just after the war, Norway did its utmost to transform the Sami and Kven people to Norwegian-speaking Norwegians in a matter of just 20 years. New laws made sure that you couldn't even buy property unless you spoke and wrote Norwegian. As a result of this process, my dad cannot recall even ever having heard his parents speaking their mother tongue. Luckily, much have been achieved since the assimilation and discrimination was the official order of the day. Some places even up to the 1960s and 70s. 2 examples are the Sami Parliament and the Finnmark law. The law ensures that the population of Finnmark in the northern Norway, both Sami and Norwegian, now own the land and the water together. The Sami Parliament, Sametinget, established in 1989, is now the representative body of the Sami people in Norway. It promotes political initiatives and has authority in issues like culture, language, reindeer farming, and education. And every 4th year, there are both parliamentary and semi-parliamentary elections. We have many members who vote in both elections. The main Sami language is also an official language in Norway. Sami rights and living conditions vary considerable depending on which country they live in. Especially in Norway and parts of Sweden, the Sami culture has been experiencing a strong renaissance of the last 4 decades. The Sami culture is well known for its ancient sound of the joik, reindeer herding on a large scale, fishing and hunting traditions, unique craftwork traditions, and indigenous clothing. There is a fast-growing arena of indigenous festivals and internationally acclaimed artists and world musicians. Though many, if not most Samis, live modern lives in the cities, they are trying to keep at least some of the rich tradition. The labor moment and our history is about solidarity. Already in 1906, an alliance of Sami activists and socialists and social democrats managed to get the first Sami elected to parliament. More than 100 years ago, Sami and Norwegian miners stood side by side, fought for the rights of working people after facing terrible working and living conditions for the mining communities. In the Norwegian Confederation of Trade Unions, the Sami people has always had a central place. LO's representatives in the ILO negotiation for Convention 169 came from the Sami people. As part of the LO Norway's leadership, I am very proud that Norway was the first country to ratify the ILO Convention 169 on indigenous peoples and tribal peoples in independent countries. The convention gives indigenous people the right to decide their own cultural development. They learn their own language and establish separate institutions to represent them. The convention also contains provisions on land rights, employment and work, training, national insurance, and health. In Norway, the Sami people have fought for and achieved a long number of rights. This applies to the right to language and language education, and right to participate, be consulted and heard in matters concerning the Sami community. This also applies to the right to preserve and further develop Sami culture, and not least, customary, property, and land rights. In the LO leadership today, we have good contact with many people at the Sami parliament. And we have active Sami unionists and politicians among our own regional and local leaders and members. Unfortunately, Norway is just one of 24 states that has ratified the convention, and the only country with a Sami population to have ratified this convention. Ulugittu. Thank you.
Thank you, Sissel. And I think you have illustrated very clearly how important it is also, this also cross-cutting alliance, with the political parties, the socialists, and also the trade unions, in order to protect, and uphold the rights of Sami in that case. And then, indeed, still the weak ratification of Convention 169 in this respect, that is actually a paramount for the protection of their right. So thank you very much for sharing your also personal experience. So I'll going now to Laure Park, who is responsible for the Maori policy, and NZEI Te Riuroa, so the union in New Zealand for primary and early childhood teachers. So Laure, also for you, I have this question. You lead the Maori policy at the union in New Zealand for primary and early childhood education. So your strategy includes organizing Maori workers, indigenizing collective agreements, as you say, and incorporating Maori values in your union, such as the responsibility to protect Mother Earth and future generation. So could you give us an overview on your work? Thank you.
No mai piki mai e ngā iwi e ngā reo ngā mana tēnā rā koutou katoa. Ko mata whaura te maunga ko ohau te awa ko Ngāti Piki a te iwi. Nō reira, ki te tangata whenua o tēnei whenua, ngā mihi, tēnā tātou katoa. Sorry, you did need to translate that. That was just my greeting to the people of this land. We're called tangata whenua. And also for my introduction of myself to you, which is traditional for us to do. I wanted to start by actually talking a little bit about te tiriti o Waitangi. And there was a little bit of a conversation, and if you had been with the climate change group of people, you would have heard them talk about that as well. The founding document of Aotearoa is Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi. It varies in how the government complies, adheres to, does what is expected of them through the treaty. But for us as Māori, it's a document upon which we can demand our rights and actually say, according to the treaty, these are the things that we are promised, and you should comply. They don't always do as we ask, but we try. Within our organisation of NZEI Te Riuroa, the primary and early childhood union that I belong to and I work for, we have, as part of our constitution, we include Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And also, as part of that, we have what we call a tongi. And a tongi is a saying that is being delivered by an ancestor. And the saying is, ko tahi te koha o te ngira, e kuhuna ai te mero mā, te mero whero, te mero pango. There is but one eye of the needle through which we all must pass. The red, the white and the black threads, which brings together that absolute kōrero, that discussion that we would have. If we are all going to be moving in one direction, then we have to all go the same way. We may go in a circuitous route to get to that place, but there is only one eye through which we must pass in order that things work for both peoples. So for Māori, in our organisation, we have over the last 2 years been practising a policy that we call moku te ao. And the world is mine. And we say this to all our children. You should be put first. You are the people of the future. And we don't just mean you child, we mean you Māori child. Because if everyone doesn't support the Māori child to be the first and the best in the country, then who is going to do that? Just the same as a discussion about languages. We speak language, we speak te reo Māori in our country, but if we are the only people that speak it, then it will die. everyone else in the country has to speak it as well. And so we encourage non-Māori people to learn the language as well, and as much as they can. We're not expecting them to be fluent tomorrow, but we are expecting them to be able to pronounce the names of our children correctly, pronounce the names of our places correctly, respond to our parents correctly in the right way. So by that, you're absolutely ensuring that teachers do this in their classes, and then the parents respond accordingly. In the process of pursuing mōku te ao in our particular union, we have provided what we call ngā pou, signposts, for people to follow. And they are traditional values that we have as Māori, and one of those values is whanaungatanga. Whanaungatanga literally means relationships. So part of the union's job is to make sure we develop relationships. So we whakawhanaunga. So in our groups, if we were meeting in a similar meeting like this, we would deliberately introduce ourselves in the like manner. So everyone introduces yourselves. And as you introduce yourself, as we would do, the room can be full of people, but we would go around the room so that everyone has an opportunity to introduce themselves to the others. As the introduction happens, you then start saying, oh, kia ora relation, how are you? You may not never met that person, but you connect the dots with they're from the same mountain as me, they're from the same river as me, so they must be belonging to the same tribe as me. So in those kinds of signposts, we use those all the way through the work that we do in the union. We have other, well, I'm doing them for you too. The other ones we have, are words like whakamana. Mana is pride. So to honour the identity of someone is to whakamana them. And so you would build up that person, so proud to be who they are, proud to stand as they are, proud to pronounce themselves to be Māori. That's another one of the signposts, if you like. And when we were talking about indigenising contracts, that's what we are trying to get our government agency to include. How do you whakamana workers? How do you build the pride of workers so that they do the things that are necessary for a very prosperous country? We haven't convinced them yet, I'd have to say. Another pou that we have is manaakitanga. You all do that in every one of your country places. Manaakitanga is to care for people. So when people visit you, you open the door. You provide them with a cup of tea to start with. You provide them with a meal if they're going to visit you. So all of those signposts are very much part of how we live, what we do, and it is part of the work we do as a union as well. So the final one I was going to mention, which is not all of them that we use, is kaitiakitanga. To be a kaitiaki is to be a guardian. To be a kaitiaki is to look after the land. And to be a kaitiaki, you must be connected to that land at all times. So if I belong to a particular marae, and so does Rongopai, and so does every other Māori person in Aotearoa. So when we talk about having ahi ka, we have a connection to that marae, and anyone that comes to that marae, we will manaki them. We will care for them, because that is in our nature to do that. So, but with kaitiakitanga is an added issue. You actually have to look after Mother Earth as a guardian, and you must care for Mother Earth. And I was just thinking, Joe, that part of that conversation that we need to do as Indigenous people is to talk about the things that we do to care for Mother Earth. Normal practices that we do. They're not the ones that the corporates will be buying or selling. They're not the ones that probably your government will even worry about, but they are the everyday things that you would do. I mean, how do Aboriginal people survive in the dry lands? How have they survived there for years? And yet, all of a sudden, because there are droughts, we're suddenly, oh my God, what are we going to do? Why don't you ask the people who have lived there for years? Why don't you ask people who have this knowledge already in their kete, in their bag? I should stop there, shouldn't I?
You can go on if you want, but
maybe we can. I'll answer your questions.
Indeed. Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. You gave us a really like a touch of reality on how the values and the proudness of being Maori can actually be integrated within what you have called the indigenized collective agreements, and also on trade union practices, daily practices in that respect. So thank you very much. I'm now happy to open the floor for contributions from the friends who are here today, for questions, but also for comments, and also indeed for any kind of contribution that you feel like sharing with us. So please, could you just introduce yourself before? Thanks.
Do Brasil, da UGT Brasil. Eu tenho uma inquietude muito séria e quero compartilhar com os tetos se há a relevância da importância de los povos originários está organizado e representado em lo movimento sindical. Por que digo que essa inquietude é muito importante? Porque em Brasil, nós outros já teríamos ratificado a Convenção 69 desde 2002, e que nós outras vivenciamos em últimos 5 anos com um governo de extrema-direita, fascista, que nesse período praticamente excluiu todos os direitos de povos indígenas, levando ao suicídio, levando a assassinatos, a retirada das aldeias. Então, tudo isso, o que nós outros entendemos? Que se não há uma organização forte, se os povos originários não estão organizados em lo movimento sindical de forma clara, não há como se aportar diante de uma situação dessa. Daí a importância dessa incorporação e, principalmente, como disse a companheira, a perspectiva indígena. Isso é o que é mais importante para nós outros, então gostaria de ouvir esse comentário. Desculpe o portunhol, mas obrigada.
Gracias, Cássia. Is there anybody else who would like to intervene? To share comments or questions? Come on. It's a conversation. So, I mean, and it's an opportunity, also to share. Shibon, is this an attempt to approach the mic? Yes, indeed.
I just wanted to say thank you for being here, for having this session. My name's Siobhan. I am from Canada, and we have a long history of injustice that is done, but to listen to solutions that you're bringing forward, I just have to say we really appreciate that, because the pride of place, and I think how you phrased it is we're all trying to learn, and we learn from our Indigenous members, but also the Indigenous communities in Canada. So I was wondering if you have other examples of how we can find ways within our union to lift up these issues. And I say that from a place where we have a lot of history in the Canadian labour movement of partnering, and but in terms of our collective bargaining, I'm not sure if we're delivering as much as we could for our members. And so I was just hoping maybe some insights from you on that issue.
Great, thank you very much. So we have 2 reflections, dear friends and colleagues. I don't know if you want to give it a go. and you know, with some feedbacks on that. Laura, would you like to?
Yep, I can talk about that.
Yes, please.
Kia ora. Thank you for your question. I was just going to refer to collective agreements. In our particular union, we have managed to get what we call tangihanga leave. Tangihanga leave is bereavement leave. But when you talk about tangihanga leave, it's a little bit longer than that, because it depends what your responsibilities are when someone passes at your marae, your meeting house, like I was talking about. So that time that you will need could be longer than just the customary 1 day, 2 days that a funeral would be. So you have that ability to negotiate with your boss, if that's the correct word, to say that I'm going to need 2 weeks to fulfil all the duties that I have. It's dependent on them as to whether you get paid for a large proportion of that time or not. But you do have that right to have the leave. We also we pay speakers of the language. So speakers of Māori language so Rongopai would be entitled to what we call a Māori immersion teacher's allowance. So you get an allowance, an extra allowance, because you speak the language and you use the language all day and every day in the classroom. We have only just recently, Pacific Languages have been trying to advocate for a similar kind of allowance for Pacific teachers that use their language for teaching children as well. That is only probably going to be ratified this year for the first time. But the other part of it too is that whole indigenising the collective. And when I was talking about those signposts, that's the whole idea about it, because one of the signposts is whakapapa. Whakapapa is your genealogy. So when we're talking about whakapapa in an agreement, then it falls on the employer to prove that whakapapa connection for that particular agreement. We aren't super successful yet, but we are continuing to push it because we think it's the right way to go for us as Indigenous people, but also for all the other people in Aotearoa as well, because everybody has a mum, a dad, and so on. So everybody is not exempt from having whakapapa. So while we might use the word whakapapa, everybody else has a genealogy. So those are just small things that you can start doing with using Indigenous ideas and Indigenous values, so that they are used and they are acceptable by everyone that's promoting. Kia ora.
Great.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Thanks.
Of course.
Oh, that doesn't move very far. Hi, I'm Jo, and I'm here with the Australian Council of Trade Unions. I'm an Aboriginal woman, Marawarri Niamba mob. My family comes from Brewarren in North West New South Wales. I just wanted to add to the bargaining question, if I could. And you're doing amazing stuff, and some of our unions totally are as well. But I'd like to say that maybe when you look at collective agreements, look at them with an Indigenous lens. Now, you were saying you've got 30% Indigenous members. So have you had a conversation with those Indigenous members about what it is that means to them to be put into an agreement? Now, we have, in our definition of family that covers every person I work for the Australian government, I'm a rank and filer, but this is a lot across a lot of collective agreements in the country now. Our definition of family includes the word kinship, and so that includes our extended family. So therefore, if I need to take carers leave or personal leave or sorry business like leave to go to a funeral or something, my extended family are counted as my immediate family. And so that's really important to Indigenous peoples, because we don't classify
our family is what you would call a nuclear family. It's our family's that big. That's really important to include in agreements. The Australian Council of Trade Unions has an Indigenous committee, and we're just about to develop what we're calling model clauses that we're going to, not that you're allowed to patent bargain, but it's going to be a model clause book that's going to go out through the membership to enable them to also include in their collective agreements things that are specific to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in this country. And one of the really big things that's a big ticket item, and I'm not sure if it's everywhere, it probably is in New Zealand, is cultural load. And you'll find that a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people or Indigenous peoples, anything that's Indigenous people come to them to do. And so it's an additional cultural load. So we're actually going to start looking at cultural load clauses in agreements as well. Over.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether... ¿Sí? Sí, claro.
Sí. Sí, lo que pasa es que quería plantear la situación de Chile en torno a lo difícil que es la organización, como planteaba la compañera de Brasil. Nosotros no tenemos contratos colectivos diferenciados, porque por lo general lo que se busca es integración, una integración completa. No hay diferenciación. Me llama mucho la atención lo que hacen ustedes con el tema del lenguaje, porque efectivamente el lenguaje es lo primero que se pierde. Yo quiero comentar que en Chile hace un par de años atrás murió la última hablante original del lenguaje cahuéscar. Entonces efectivamente son cosas que hemos ido perdiendo. Tenemos más precarización hacia el pueblo mapuche es en la informalidad y en los trabajos que son puntuales por temporada, donde tampoco existe mucha organización. Entonces ahí es donde nos cuesta mucho y tenemos estos desafíos. Tenemos grandes dirigentes nosotros también de pueblos originarios, identificados como mapuche. El 99% de los chilenos que se identifican, de los que se identifican con algún pueblo, se identifican como mapuche. Entonces, efectivamente, tenemos mucha identidad, pero no diferenciación. Entonces, ahí yo creo que a lo mejor podría ser algo que debiéramos tomar, y lo recojo como un aprendizaje de este panel. Muchas gracias por la transmisión de conocimiento.
Kia ora tātou. Ngā mihi, Loris, I think one of the things that you have been instrumental in our union is also our cultural leave that gives us the ability to do a number of cultural issues, like at the moment performing arts or Māori performing arts is a real key. And one of the things is that with my staff, out of my 20 staff, I lose 10 staff members for a whole week who are paid to go and perform on a national forum. And so the support of our union in getting us through the block has been really instrumental. We also use the same leave to attend, like our colleague here from Australia, his son is playing in the Indigenous Rugby League tournament, the Māoris versus the Aboriginal team next year. And so we have a number of our whānau who are leaving and taking time off to go to school. So I think one of the things is that we need to thank our unions and thank the struggles that we have to recognise. And I think that renaissance or that revitalising of our language was part of that journey back to reclaim some of that. So thank you, Lois, for your hard work, and thank you for the rest of the panel for your cordial conversation.
Okay, I'm afraid that we are almost at the end. It went so fast. but maybe I just have a really final quick question for you, because of course this is a very important area that as ITUC we would like, of course, to support and to engage more, so to speak. So my question would be also what the ITUC can do, in order to help the affiliates in those realities, and how can we support you better in your daily work, in your collective bargaining and negotiations, but also when it comes to implementation of legislation that can actually be conducive and supportive to the protection of the rights of indigenous workers. So just a very quick reflection from you that could also serve as a guidance for us for the next year to come. Yes.
Kia ora. Quick kōrero from me is you could do this more often.
Yeah.
And you could do it online so that we converse with each other on a regular basis and we don't feel so isolated from each other and only see each other once every 4 years. Kia ora.
Great.
Sí, mira, nosotros en Latinoamérica estamos trabajando con Runa Sur, que hubo un encuentro en Argentina hace poco tiempo. Entonces, nos estamos juntando en Latinoamérica, pero efectivamente nos falta esto, conversar, conocer las distintas realidades, porque yo es la primera vez que participo en un congreso de la CCI y he conocido mucha gente, muchas realidades completamente distintas, lo cual también te permite, primero que nada, ver que no estás tan equivocado en algunas cosas que estás haciendo o que estás impulsando, pero que también o estás un poco más avanzado o estás muy atrás. Entonces, efectivamente, esto nos permite, esta conversación, estos encuentros, nos permiten poder conocernos y compartir estas experiencias. Yo creo que cada 4 años ese podría ser el tema.
Perfecto. Muchísimas gracias. I'm just checking with Cecil. Do you agree with the same suggestions?
Yes, I think we have much to learn from each other, so it's very good to be here. It should have been more people here. We have to work together with this in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. A big round of applause for our great speakers and for the contribution and experiences. And your suggestions have been heard. And of course, as ITUC, I can confirm that we will be there for you to support and to keep, engaging on that. And the exchanges of experience will be, for sure something that we can commit and go ahead with that. So thank you very much again, and thanks very much for you, and have a good evening. Thanks.